So in your mind, what does fair criticism of Israel actually look like?
Just about anything.
Well, when we say it, we're like, you can criticize Israel, yeah, but then if you see somebody doing it all the time, it comes into question. We start to say, okay, really? Especially during a war? Like,
look, anything Israel's doing can be criticized. I don't know what the limits of fairness are because I don't know if I'm wrong. In other words, I think it's deeply ridiculous to criticize Israel for going to war in Gaza. That's a very common criticism. Why did you go to war? How do we leave Hamas standing there, readying the next October 7th when they declared multiple times they're on television and that ran on Israeli? How could Israelis possibly leave them standing? There are hostages there. So what we just say, okay, fine, you massacred us, you took our hostages, you promised to do it again and again, and we promise not to go after you if you give us back the hostages. That, to me, is a ridiculous argument. Unless I'm wrong, in which case it's not an argument that's beyond the pale of legitimacy. The only arguments that are beyond the pale of legitimacy is the desire for a people to disappear. That, I think, is not legitimate. And that's anti-Zionism. So the belief that there shouldn't be an Israeli people, that the Jews should not have survived, and they should not have, and they had no other way to survive. They're the last living Jew in the Eastern Hemisphere. Forgive me, French and Polish and German Jews, but statistically, by and large, the last living Jews, despite the fact the reestablishment of some communities after the war, the last living Jews in the Eastern Hemisphere are the Israelis. You don't get to wish they didn't exist. So that's I don't even have to debate you. It's a debate over whether I'm allowed to exist. Fuck you, and it's not a conversation. Everything else, Israel should, it's legitimate to say there should be no nationalism of any kind, no tribalism, there should be no borders, everything should be beautiful and open and communist utopia. That's a legitimate thing to say. And then we can debate it and discuss it and argue whether it's possible and whether it's a good outcome. But I don't think there should be many limits except for the limit of not wishing millions of people didn't exist.
Right. And what about this claim about the disproportionate criticism of Israel, the hyperfixation of the world, obsessed with everything that the Israeli IDF military does, as opposed to when you talk about what the hundreds of thousands of Muslims slaughtered in Syria and nobody cares, the UN's fixation on Israel. Oftentimes that's used as a talking point to demonstrate that there's anti-Semitism here, that this is a double standard is applied to the Jewish state amongst all others. Yeah,
there's absolutely anti-Semitism. At its core, it's anti-Semitism. It's all it is. It's not anything else. And nobody can seriously make an argument that it's anything else. If Yemen didn't register on your radar, but Gaza is the only important thing in the world, then you are not, it's not about dead children, and it's not about suffering civilians. For you, it's about who the perpetrator is and what that perpetrator represents in your symbology. And there's no question of that. I've never heard a convincing argument that it's okay for the world to ignore what's happening within 1,000 miles of Israel in the last 10 years, but not to ignore Israel. And that somehow Israel's the great criminal surrounded by the Assads and the Houthis and the Iranians. And
when Kneecap did that big sign at Coachella said, fuck Israel, what was it, Free Palestine?
Free Palestine, fuck Israel.
I was also struck by, usually like when the Darfur genocide was happening, I didn't know who was doing the Darfur genocide. You just heard like, save the children in Darfur. It was never about like, fuck the perpetrator and save the victims. Like, why is that first part in there? It usually isn't.
That's interesting.
If the Egyptians were fighting the war in Gaza, nobody would know anything about it and nobody would care.
Right.
And I cannot escape that feeling. And so I cannot believe the world's morality just literally for what it is. It still feels righteous to them because there's still dead kids in Gaza. And there are thousands of dead kids in Gaza. One of the things that we've suffered from over the last 19, 20 months is that we are very incompetently led. On both sides of the Atlantic, by the way. I think American Jewry came into this moment of this sudden surge in anti-Semitism. Look, when you have Ian Carroll on Rogan, outright anti-Semitism, bullshit about the Talmud talking about raping 3-year-old girls, just outright there, which is, by the way, not what the Talmud doesn't even let you have sex before marriage. With respect. All of this stuff that then Americans suddenly see when Joe Rogan will platform that, and then I forget what happened, but it was like this 1 week where there were these like 3 major anti-Semitic events.
Well, and it was a couple of different ones.
And if you put them all together, it was the single biggest media event of the week in America. It was like 40 million people that saw just bloody-minded anti-Semitism. And American Jews are like, what the hell's happening? And almost the entire institutional edifice of American Jewry which is the most organized of all. I mean, just these community charities, these federations, and ADL and AJCs, and all these different, AAAs, almost have been unable to grapple with it seriously and deal with it and fight back. And you have an institutional edifice that is astonishing and unique and amazing, and God forbid, don't tear it down. But they're just not built for this moment and these platforms and this technology and how information spreads now.
So let me
I was going to say something about Bibi, but we can get to that.
No, go ahead. Yeah,
Bibi.
on the Israeli side also. What's going on?
leadership, Bibi.
No, tell us.
And in Israel, we have a political elite that is very narcissistic and very incompetent, just literally incompetently led. I've been complaining the whole war that Bibi, because he won't prosecute the war aggressively, because he keeps caving to American pressure, and now we actually find out that it wasn't worth waiting for Trump, we need to carve our own path, even at the cost of losing their missiles. And then we'll have worse missiles, less exact missiles. Our enemies will suffer more. That's actually a tragedy. We might actually win the war because we don't have a choice anymore. So, but Netanyahu has always led down the path of least resistance. So when Biden says to him, you can't go into Rafah, well, that means you can't stop this resupplying of Hamas through the tunnels into Egypt. And so for months and months and months, until May of last year, Hamas was just resupplying its missiles that was taking out Israeli soldiers, and it was resupplying itself. And then we finally went into Rafah, and we went into that Egyptian-Gaza border, and we started shutting down those tunnels. And since then, Hamas has begun actually shrinking and depleting, and it could take 2 more years to completely evaporate. But nevertheless, it has actually begun to. So Netanyahu waited months of Biden telling him don't go in, and then when does he go in? When Israeli politics forces him to. When the far right says you gotta escalate, you gotta move into Rafah. You think Biden's pressure, we're going to leave the government and your government's going to fall. Then, to prevent his government from falling, he does it. He is a man who for 3 months at a time won't speak to Israelis, not even on right-wing media that likes him. He is a man, repeatedly over the last 19 months, he's a man who won't meet the victims of his mistakes and his bad strategy. He still won't visit Kibbutz Nir Oz is this very famous, one of the 3 great massacres of October 7, and they've invited him to visit, and he won't visit. All the politicians to his right have visited. He won't visit. And so we are led by, and he's just an example, a lot of the people in Likud have behaved in the same way, and it's abominable. And in the meantime, Likud is advancing legislation to not just continue, but even in some ways expand exemptions and subsidies for yeshivas and for the ultra-Orthodox who won't serve. Well, I have members of my family who are in 300 days in military service, and businesses have crashed, and families people haven't seen their kids in 300 days. And that's the government that leads us. And one of the things that government did was shut down the public diplomacy ministry at the beginning of the war because the politician leading it didn't know what to do with it. And fire spokespeople and refuse in 19 months to build out a serious campaign. When Netanyahu needs to win an election, Likud grabs all the best marketing people in Israel and establishes a campaign and goes out and tries to hack the brainstem of Israelis, right? That's how marketing works. That's how campaigns work. Nobody has done that for the country in the war. That's Hamas's fundamental arena.
Yeah.
What's Hamas's war strategy?
He does speak English, though, really well. Bibi. That's my joke about it. That no matter what happens, hey, he's kind of the only one who's going to try to be funny. I'm going to try. I said no matter what happens, he speaks English.
No, you agreed with me just now. What did you just say? You just said he should know.
Yeah,
he should know. How dare he not establish a serious campaign? Not only that, but then you get these Smotrich guys saying things like, yeah, no, we're going to clear them all out.
Tweeting from the bathroom.
What's wrong with ethnic cleansing? And stuff like that from these Israeli politicians. Hamas's fundamental strategy is the death of Gazans for the eventual destruction, for the undermining of Israel and the eventual destruction.
Is it incompetence, or you think there was some sort of benefit to him not making the case for Israel globally?
No, I think it's cowardice.
Okay.
I think it's cowardice. He doesn't speak at all. He doesn't speak to Israelis. Over the course of the last 15 years, he's gone months at a time, dozens. I mean, he does not speak. He does not. He trusts in the tribalism of his supporters. And I say tribalism, forgive me, Likud voters. Some of you are my best friends. He trusts in the tribalism of his supporters. The Likud party has never in its history, not once, not for any reason, replaced its leader. Not since 1948. There's only been 4 Likud leaders. Wow. Nothing has, 29 years in opposition did not make them replace Begin. They have never replaced their leader, and they are already starting to forgive Bibi for October 7th. Yeah. So he's trusting that and just keeping his mouth shut and hoping to ride it to the next election.
Well, Haviv, we actually have Bibi on the line if he wants to address some of your grievances.
Please, he won't talk to me. He won't. Let's do it. Come on, bring him on.
Haviv Rettig Gur, you like to talk a lot, but I'm a man of action, and I can speak just as well as you, so I'll go tit for tat with you anytime you want. If you want to, say it to my face. Say it to my face.
We're going to have to bomb Fordo without Trump.
I don't even know what that is.
Well, that was an indictment if I've ever heard one, but a pro-Israel one and not an anti-Israel one. So it's nice to be able to do that. I guess that's what fair criticism of Israel looks like.
Exactly.
Because no one's looking at you like...
Who says this? Criticize Israel like they're your mother, not your mother-in-law?
Oh, that's good.
I think Dan Senior might say that.
Look, you can criticize Israel however you feel is authentic and true to what you believe.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't tell the Israelis they don't deserve to exist. Yeah. They're not going to listen to you. Your criticism will be for your own sense of yourself. Yeah. Right. It is bigotry. It is genocidal bigotry. And you. You want a serious criticism? Anything is on the table.